welcome back to another episode. Today we have Drew Thomas Allen with us. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Tyler, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You too. Grateful to have you on. So if you can just start us off a little bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a conservative author. I'm a political analyst, which may be foreign to some people. You know, it means I talk about politics and the issues of the day. So on radio shows throughout the country, TV, and then I'm a columnist too. So I write a lot of articles that are mostly, viewed in conservative circles out there. And so that's kind of what I do today.
Got it. So with the show, what I like to do is kind of start with the origin. So let's just say maybe like middle school, high school, that area. Like, did you see yourself doing anything that you're doing now, or was your vision way different?
Yeah, that cracks me up. No. If you ask me, I'm 34, right, Tyler? So
Yeah.
if you ask me, 14 years ago, absolutely not. 10 years ago, absolutely not. I mean, this kind of just happened. And in terms of anybody taking anything from my story, even if they don't agree with my politics, what they could take is that, I have a very peculiar life experience here. I was educated in an all-male college prep school in Dallas, Texas, kind of one of these elitist institutions, if you will. And I went on to Pepperdine University and actually had an acting scholarship. So actually, my focus for many, many years was laser focused on, I just wanted to be the best actor I could be, okay? I got that to pay for my school. And then when I graduated from college, I actually moved to New York City because there's a saying in the film and acting world that theater makes you good, TV makes you rich, and film makes you famous. And so I was very focused on being good, and I love the craft of acting. So I moved to New York, and a year after being there, I had representation. And I was auditioning. That's mainly what you do as an actor, working a little bit, but I was doing temp work on the side. And I had a temp agent who'd become a friend of mine. And he called me one day out of the blue, Tyler, and he said, "Hey, I got this rich friend. He'll pay $1,000 a week for you to basically live in his brownstone $6 million house in the West Village." And I was thinking, all right, this is a pretty good gig. I can rehearse my lines in my pre-war apartment with my 6'7" roommate that takes up most of the apartment, or I can live in this $6 million place and rehearse my lines there. So long story short, this is just how life works out. So I go to this interview, and we joked later I was interviewing to be the pool boy. Okay, you can understand the meaning because it was the president of Marc Jacobs at the time, Robert Duffy, who I was interviewing with, and I was interviewing for the house cleaning job. Okay. And long story short, I'm sitting at this table. I don't know, there's 10 people around this table, maybe all personal assistants. I don't know anything about fashion. Abercrombie and Fitch was the highlight of my fashion, life in the past.
Me too.
You too. So you understand. And so I wasn't nervous, but he asked me to talk about myself. And I just said, "Hey, I speak Italian," which is true. I speak Italian. And so he said, "Well, would you want to live there?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have a house there one day." He said, "Well, how about next month?" And then it just went silent. He looked to an assistant. He said, "Get Susie on the phone." Somebody dials the phone, hands it to him. And the next thing I know, he's on the phone saying, "Hey, I've got this adorable kid. He's perfect for the Milan job. We're coming to the office." And so just like that, I got up. Thank God it wasn't like some sex trafficking ring or something like that. But I get up and I go with this guy with his drive to Spring Street, and I'm signing paperwork to work for Marc Jacobs. Literally a month later, I was in Milan, Italy. I didn't know what my job was going to be. And I ended up being a store manager. Okay. So I opened the first retail store without any retail experience. And, and that's part of what we do in life, right? It's sink or swim. And I was thrust in this situation. I enjoyed it. Ultimately, I ended up coming back to LA and acting again. I ended up getting into screenwriting. I managed a couple other Marc Jacobs store along the way. And I started a film production company and produced movies. And so my career never took shape like I really wanted it to. I was around other very successful people that people would know now who had more success than I did. And I was frustrated at the time. I had a little bit of a victim mentality, I think, for a while. I was thinking, why isn't this happening for me? I've done everything right. I know that I'm a good actor, but the opportunity hasn't been there. Mm-hmm. And so long story short, I was working really diligently on a biopic about my cousin who was a golfer. His name was Byron Nelson. Okay. He won 11 in a row back in 1945. He was a legend of the golf game. And I had had conversations with people, and that was my I was so focused on making this movie, and things just kept falling apart. And finally, I just realized, look, I'm going to relinquish some control, and just I'm going to see what happens, because maybe I've been so myopic, and I've had such tunnel vision that I can't see what opportunities or what is meant for me. And so 2020, with the elections and things like that, I lost a lot of lifelong friends. I'm not here to be a baby about it, but it's just the reality, because I'm a conservative. I've never changed. I've had these friends my whole life, and they told me they couldn't respect me anymore. Okay. It's just, that's what happened in the political climate. So I got really active. I'd always been studious. I'd always loved history. I'd always written a lot. And so I put all that energy and everything into writing a book called Uncommon Sense. And then through my writing endeavors, I didn't even pursue this. Someone I knew a publicist and recommended me to this publicist. And so he had read some of my material, some of the political things that I had been writing, some of the articles. And then we started working together. And then fast forward nearly a year, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, doing radio interviews, TV, writing about these issues, researching these issues, and then doing my podcast, The Drew Allen Show, to just talk about it more extensively in an hour period. So that's the short, long version, Tyler.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's what I wanted. So what is like the overarching, I guess, theme of what you write and talk about on your podcast? Let's start there, and then we'll get more detailed.
Yeah. So I think I try to explain to people, let me preface it this way. I've been a conservative my whole life, but if you think about the things we just talked about, working in fashion, living in Milan, Italy for 2.5 years, working in Hollywood, those are not conservative circles. They're not conservative bastions by any means. I've always been an outsider in that world, but I've also been exposed to the way those individuals think, the way they perceive the world and politics. And so I've had a front row seat to their thought process, where they're coming from. And also I've been forced to debate these people and formulate very, very sound, coherent arguments to make my own case. And so I've kind of taken that experience, and as I look at the lens of what's happening in America today, which I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, you should be very, very worried. Things like inflation, for example, they don't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you have a D or an R by your registration. You're equally screwed, all right? These issues are going to affect everyone. And so what I have tried to do is, one, people misunderstand what conservatism is. They don't understand what I represent. I joke about being the pool boy from Marc Jacobs. You can imagine that I have, and it doesn't matter. I hate to even have to say this, but I've worked around gay people my whole life. I have many close gay friends. I don't care. But people would say, oh, if they don't know me, oh, Drew's conservative. He must be a homophobe. He must be this kind of phobe or that kind of phobe. And so I'm trying to explain to people what conservatism is, and to get us back on track to what makes America the greatest nation in the history of the world. It's not accidental. It's not accidental. It's based on values and our particular ideology and philosophy that we've embraced: constitutional rights, unalienable rights, the belief that we have autonomy and independence, individual rights, not collective rights. And so what I've seen is the indoctrination of not only so many of my friends, but so many other people that, especially in our age range, I'm 34. So I just want to get the message out and try and get people having a conversation again, and hopefully just get through to people on certain points, because we're not going to agree on everything. I understand that this is a nation of over 300 million people, but the problem is we have factionalism right now. So nobody can have a rational conversation and look at things about what's best for the country, what are actually solutions to solve it. Because, if you're a Democrat, you automatically have to believe this way. If you're a Republican, you automatically have to agree this way. And so, it's, look what's happening with Dave Chappelle or anything like that. It's insane how polarized we are.
Yeah. Look, when you get to a point where people are literally taking comedic lines and saying that they're wrong or right, that in itself is inaccurate. Like, it's not, a comedic line is not meant to be a yes or a no. It is literally what it is. It's for a laugh. So even just going down that path is crazy to me. But so there's a lot of questions coming up for me. I'm loving this conversation with you. So, like, first, what I see as being the biggest issue right now is, so I'm like, I'm a fan of like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, like those are the guys that I watch a lot. And although I like them greatly, and I'd say it's even more from what I see of Shapiro, he's willing to debate others, but I feel a lot of times what's happening on both sides is they, like, a lot of the videos you see is they're like making fun of the other side, like how crazy like the left thinks, or how crazy they're. And when in reality, I feel the only way to solve this, whatever this whole mess is we have to be talking to each other more, instead of just being like, okay, that idea is stupid and here's 20 reasons why, and let me make a funny. So I guess having said all that as just background, in your mind, or how would you describe conservatism? And then secondly, how do you see the nature of what I just said and how to maybe solve that issue? Because I just feel like we're fighting back and forth, but we're not sitting at a table together and actually trying to solve things. So that's my piece.
Yeah. I mean, I try to explain and define conservatism every chance I get, especially on my own podcast as well. And so, I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, conservatism to me is the founding ideology of this country. Okay. When George Washington was president of the United States, the first president, we did not have factions. We didn't have political factions. There were not parties as were developed later on. Everyone's allegiance was to this country. And even George Washington would say, he said in his farewell address, when he took the initiative to step down and set the precedent for presidents only serving 2 terms, he said, look, we may have slight differences, between and he was talking about regionally at the time, north, east, south, west. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, what unites us is so much stronger. We all have to be patriotic about this country. And look, we're all united by a common manners, common culture, common religion at the time. And these things he could not emphasize enough about the well-being and health of the nation going forward. We can't allow ourselves to be divided based on, at that time, it was obviously based on where you lived. And so, conservatism is the belief in unalienable rights. It's the belief in a constitutional system, because remember, we are the greatest nation in the history of the world, and we are a revolutionary idea. I mean, prior to 1776, everyone who ever walked on this earth lived under some sort of king, some emperor, some type of ruling elite. And so the idea before the Constitution was written, and these brilliant men, was that, look, the citizens are slaves and those in government are the masters. And we flipped that on its head and we said, no, we reject that notion. We, the people, are actually the master. We have independence. And it's actually the government who are the servants. And remember, our founding documents limit the power of what the government can do, not what we can do. Okay. And so what this unleashes is, independence. It gets rid of this idea that we have to depend on the government for everything, this victimhood, this mentality of dependency on something else. That doesn't serve anyone well. I always bring up the Chinese proverb, right? If you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. What I, as a conservative, want for every person in this country is to learn how to fish. Okay? But there are those in politics today who want to give a man a fish time and time again. And the reason is not because they want to be some benefactor. The reason is insidious. It's because they want that person dependent. They want to enslave that person by not teaching them to fish and having them depend on me for their meal. And so we do have this slave state emerging. And what we have today is antithetical to the founding of this country. It rejects everything that's made this nation great. And this is what I try to explain, is about what the Democrat Party really represents. And look, I'm not a special pleader for Mitch McConnell and many people in the Republican Party. The problem is there's a new war between Washington, D.C. and the American people. But if I'm going to target one party right now that is all in for authoritarianism and totalitarianism, it is the Democrat Party. It's undeniable at this point. And I study the text of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. I read it twice a year. But so many Democrats, friends of mine, very good people, have not read those books. You know, they believe this myth that, oh, the conservative is bad, the Republican Party is bad, but the Democrat Party wants what's best for everyone. It's not true. And they express it. They state it explicitly. They're not even hiding it anymore. And so I just want to wake people up. And then you had a second question, and you'll have to remind me, Tyler.
No, I will. And actually, before we get to that, though, because the question's kind of like, how do we solve it? But I want to hold off on that for a second, because another question came up as you were talking, and it's like, so I actually watch a lot of Alex Jones too, InfoWars. I am a fan. I know he's very maybe the most controversial guy ever, but like he's right most of the time. So whether you think he's crazy or not, it's one of those situations, in my opinion, where truth is stranger than fiction. And he just talks about that 3 hours a day, basically, is what it is. So regardless, do you think that the Democratic Party, and obviously it wouldn't, I don't think it would be the whole party, but people in government, like, is it evil intent, or do they actually think what they're trying to build is better for the people? And to me, I feel from watching Alex Jones as much as I do, it seems like evil intent, but like, I almost am just like shocked. I'm just like, the decisions being made by like Biden and stuff are, in my opinion, so poor that I'm like, you can't actually think that's a good choice. Like, so it must be evil. But I digress, and I'm just curious, like, which one do you think it is? Ignorance or evil intent? It's gotta be one or the other.
Yeah, for those who are actually making these policy decisions, those who are in positions of authority, it's evil intent. For your average Democrat voter, they're just misguided. They believe the lies that they're told. But you know, I'll give you a perfect example. If you want to look at what happened in Afghanistan when we left Afghanistan, statistically, it's impossible that you could make the wrong decision without intentionally doing so every single time. You would think you'd get at least one thing right. I mean, we left, you know, over 800, you know, we left billions of dollars behind in arms, right? In terms of our weapons, our aircraft, our guns, ammunition, all of it. So we left that behind, which is stupid. I mean, obviously, logically, if you're going to, you know, a third grader could develop a better strategy. Hey, we're going to pull out of this country. The Taliban's closing in. Should we like leave the guns behind, or should we like get them out before we pull our troops out? I mean, a third grader would say we should probably get all of our stuff out.
Yeah.
You know,
it's crazy.
And then on top of it, you know, the next thing you would do, of course, logically, is any Americans who were left over there, knowing that the Taliban were going to take over, because we know in the private phone calls, we know that Biden knew all of this. The Taliban was going to come in and they were going to wipe the, those who were defending Kabul in these areas out. They didn't have stand a chance. And so, you know, and then so we leave all these Americans behind. And then it just gets worse and worse, decision by decision. And then we try and secure this airport, except we haven't gotten any of the Americans out. And then we say, well, you know, it's their job to get to the airport, except the Taliban's hunting these people down. And then we have, you know, nearly almost a dozen, you know, Americans who lose their lives in a suicide attack. And then we find out that they actually knew who the suicide bomber was going to be. And they decided apparently not to take him out and not make the drone strike. But then we go to get revenge and we kill, you know, nearly a dozen innocent Afghans, including 7 children who were putting water in the car, who actually worked for a California aid organization that had nothing to do, but we were lied to and told they were ISIS-K planners, high-level planners. And so we were lied to again. I mean, it is insidious at this point. And who benefits from that situation? Well, China's friendly with the Taliban. Look, we cancel pipelines in this country to destroy our energy independence and increase energy prices here, while we help Russia get a pipeline. It's absolutely insidious. Everything the government is doing is to bring about the destruction and ruin of America and embolden our enemies. And look, I say, look, how do you comprehend, for example, if you're going to try and say Ted Bundy, gosh, like, can you comprehend Ted Bundy, like how or why somebody would do what he did? Or Adolf Hitler? Like, I can't comprehend it as a good, decent, moral human being. But we don't have to understand the why. We never will understand the why, because we aren't wired that way. We just want to build careers. We want to take care of our families. We're not focused on every day power for myself, subjugating somebody else. We'll never understand it. What we do have to do is recognize that it's taking place and stop it.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, that would lead into like how to solve it. So yeah, I guess that would be my next question. Then I want to dive into your book. Like, what do you think would be the way to potentially, but see if they have evil intent, then like that makes it a lot more, then they're not even wanting to have the conversation. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is very, very challenging. I think at the end of the day, what I usually say is, if you think back to Ronald Reagan, master communicator, when he won election and then re-election, I mean, he pretty much, let's just say he won all 50 states essentially, right? He lost one state against Walter Mondale. But the point is, he was certainly one of the most popular presidents in American history in terms of the electoral makeup, because he was great at explaining what was wrong, for example, with Jimmy Carter's policies. He was great at articulating why we were suffering, what was the cause, and then articulating what his solutions were and what the benefit was going to be to the average American citizen. And that's where we've lost ground, is we have not articulated ourselves. We've allowed ourselves to be defined by another party, and it's incorrect. But we've also, I mean, look, do you think John Boehner or Mitch McConnell have ever converted a single Democrat voter to the Republican Party?
Yeah, no.
Never.
Yeah.
They make me not want to be associated with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
So this is the challenge, and you have people like Rush Limbaugh, who of course is controversial if you get out there and talk to Democrats, but he was extremely effective, right? He was great at simplifying things and explaining them. And so when we have an education system, look, I know people who've raised somebody who's relatively conservative. They go off to college and they've told me the kid comes home after 1 or 2 semesters and they're a Marxist.
Yep.
This is the reality of the situation we face. And we have not fought those battles. We've relinquished those battles because I think a lot of Republicans, conservatives, we just want to kind of live and let live. But the problem is the other side doesn't want to live and let live. They demand obedience. I mean, look at it with the COVID vaccines and everything else like that. I mean, look, if I sit here and say, I don't care, get the vaccine or don't get the vaccine, that's not good enough. It's no, everyone has to agree with me or we have to annihilate you. You make a transgender joke, you're done. We're coming for you. We want to destroy your life, your career, everything else.
Yeah. It's yeah, on the vaccine, and well, we'll see if this stays on YouTube now. The logic behind all that to me is just fascinating. There is no logic, actually. That's why it's fascinating to me. Of like, if I have it and then you don't, then I should be worried because I have it. I don't know. I can't do the math. Doesn't really add up there, but
no.
So okay, so then you write this book, Uncommon Sense. So what give kind of like an overview of what's the book about in general?
Yeah, so it's inspired by Thomas Paine's book Common Sense, which he wrote in the Revolutionary War days. And my purpose wasn't the same, but his purpose back then was to change people's opinions to be for the war against England. All right, that was his purpose. And he called it common sense. All these things are common sense, what's happening to us. But my point is, what was once common sense back then, in terms of, rebelling against excessive taxation, against tyranny, for freedom, all the constitutional stuff we talk about, well, that was common sense. But now it's gone. I mean, we've got people that champion censorship, that champion the silencing and destruction of their enemies. If you disagree, we want to get rid of your First Amendment right. We want to come from your Second Amendment right. So my point is, what once was common is now uncommon. And so uncommon sense is my effort. Actually, it's pretty emotional. It's pretty visceral in terms of the writing style. And it's honestly quite desperate because I live in California and I started writing that book, I think, November or so of 2020. Obviously, the election stuff was going on. California, Gavin Newsom, our emperor here, had decided to lock us down for the 50th time.
Our emperor. That's not even funny, but
yeah. And I was ticked off. I was so frustrated and angry, especially when I was sitting here looking at things like, for example, apart from the French Laundry incident, he banned outdoor dining at restaurants and they had to go to carry out. But the cities themselves actually shut down whole blocks of a street and put out outdoor dining tables and encouraged the citizens of the town to get their food to go and seat themselves at unsanitized tables. And I just said, how am I the only one outraged by this? You're going to die if you go and sit outdoors at a restaurant where they can sanitize and do all the crap that you want them to do, enforce social distancing, enforce masking between bites, whatever it is. But then how can you as a county then set up outdoor seating with no supervision whatsoever and encourage people to seat themselves out there and eat their food? And so I was driven to madness. And so,
I can relate.
so, all this stuff combined with all my friends who were Democrats who basically told me they can't respect me anymore. I just tried to lay it out. I tried to use a lot of analogy and metaphor to get through to people. Like we were breaking up the class of citizens early on. Now we're doing it based on vaccination status. But even early on, right, it was about those employees that had jobs that were more important than others. And so, you had these two classes of citizens. And I was saying, this is unbelievable to me. Like, how can you people who still have jobs, your doctor, for example, you're still making your $250,000 a year. And you're here championing and telling people that have a bookstore or have a restaurant, like, screw you, shut down. Like, what if that was you out there? Just because you have a job as a doctor, you're considered necessary, and this person's considered unnecessary and thrown out to the street. Basically the government invited these people into the castle walls to have dinner in the dining room and feast. But they were on the street once before too. And they're looking down on these people who are starving, impoverished, losing their businesses and smiling. And it's like, can you guys have an ounce of compassion and just think about these individuals and what the ill effects are going to be? So it was a lot of commentary like that. I got into history in this country in terms of racism, the civil rights movement, how the Democrat Party has lied and convinced people that they're the champion of Black Americans, even though, for example, they condemn them systemically to poverty because they won't allow them to choose their own schools. They condemn them to the crappy school in the hood that they go to. And they oppose anyone who wants to give them the chance to go to a private school with vouchers or whatever else. And so I try to lay out the argument to get through to people who've just built up this wall in their minds. That's, hey, if this is not coming from a Democrat or CNN, I'm not listening.
Yeah. So a couple points there. One is there's actually an interview with Lil Wayne, the rapper, right? And they asked him, like, I forget, don't anybody listening, don't quote me exactly on this, but it was something along the lines of, like, they asked him, like, do you think racism exists in America still or something? And he's like, he basically was like, what is racism? Like, look at me, like, look where I'm at. He's like, no, you can make it as a Black American in this country. Like, look, like, I'm richer than most white people, so like, and he literally said something like that. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And did you want to say something on that?
No, I think it's a great point. And it's, those type of comments make me so overjoyed because we've all been saying this and it's so true. Only in this country, I mean, to your point, if this country is so racist, the left tries to take what I'm about to say and say, oh, that's just a trope. But if this country is so awful, why do we have a caravan of 60,000 plus immigrants trying to come here again?
Yeah, great point. And actually, just to end the racism thing, in my opinion, like, we had a Black president for 8 years. So I'm like, I don't know what else to say about that. Like, that's pretty much the nail in the coffin for me. But and look, I'm not saying that there isn't, like, racism exists for sure everywhere, but I don't think it's like a foundation of our country in its current state. So here's one thing I'm curious about, because I've experienced some of the same things. You were saying some of your friends, I think you used the word, like, they were even, like, offended, and they stopped basically wanting to associate with you. Why do you think that was? Like, what was it exactly? Because they knew you were a Republican before, right? So, like, what was it, Trump? Or, like, what was it exactly that made them literally be like, I don't want to be your friend anymore?
Well, it was the news media. That's what we have to talk about. That's how powerful they are as an entity. I wish that wasn't the case, but it is true. I mean, for 4 years, I mean, look at all the lies. This is what's amazing to me too. We were told Russia collusion. Trump stole the election, even though Hillary Clinton claimed in 2016 that she still claims the election was stolen from her. And so these people have no moral qualms whatsoever, right? It's just one-sided. But anyway, the Russia collusion, and then we go to quid pro quo and the impeachments, and we're going to get him for this, we're going to get him for that. He's evil, he's racist, he's misogynistic. There was never any evidence to back this up. And in fact, I could point to numerous Democrats who actually do fit that bill. Whether it was Ralph Northam, who was seen, previous governor of Virginia, who was seen in either blackface or the KKK attire. I mean, if that had been Donald Trump, he would have been destroyed, but Ralph Northam gets a pass. But Donald Trump never did any of those things. Donald Trump's never done anything close to as offensive as what Hunter Biden, for example, has done with the images on his laptop, with the way he's treated women, using the N-word to his lawyer in text messages time and time again. He gets a pass. And that's not even talking about all the corruption associated with it. And so anyway, unfortunately, the left, in terms of their media, which they control, CNN, NBC, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, all these people, for 4 years straight, they ginned up this outrage towards Trump. They convinced a portion of the population. And I had a friend tell me, Trump is Satan. Satan. And so, they believe this stuff. And that's what's astonishing. Very brilliant people, by the way. I have a high level of education. Most of my friends went to Harvard. They went to Stanford. They went to Yale. They went to these elite institutions, which frankly, if you graduate from one of those institutions, you're dumber than if you hadn't gone. That's just my opinion. But not to offend everyone who went to an Ivy League, but
Yeah. Did Shapiro go to an Ivy League?
He did. You know what I say though about these people, when it comes to like the conservatives and Republicans, you got people like, Ben Shapiro, who's Harvard educated. You've got Ted Cruz, right? Who's also has a Princeton degree, law school there, I think. We can't fool ourselves into thinking that any amount of credentials will qualify us to get respect from the left. People need to get that out of their minds. It doesn't matter if you go to Harvard as Ben Shapiro. It doesn't mean anything if you're not a Democrat. And so it's important that we don't waste our time trying to seek these credentials. Look at the COVID argument. You've got brilliant doctors who have counterpoints to the vaccine, counterpoints to X, Y, and Z. Look at those doctors that early on, they said that hydroxychloroquine and zinc were effective treatments against COVID. And they got smeared. Their videos got shut off of YouTube. And it turns out, of course, they were right all along. But they smeared those doctors and said that they weren't real doctors. That's what they do to people. They attack their credentials and attack your credibility.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating to me about the vaccine in general. Is it's kind of like one of those things when someone wants you to do something so bad and they keep pushing it so much. It's kind of like, okay, what is your motive here? Like something's not like, why do you want me, like the flu vaccine, the normal one, you don't want me to get that one this bad, or even any other one that I've ever heard of, like even ones that are way more serious. Like I've never seen something so just like on the media, just like a craze, like this is a must. There is no, and now they're putting harder restrictions on travel. I just saw an article like today or yesterday or something on that for people that aren't vaccinated. So here's a question for you though, and this is probably what your book really details about, is to people like me and you, like, I feel a lot of the things we're saying are common sense. And I'm a very curious individual, which is why I do the podcast. And like, that's why I want to talk to someone on the left that like disagrees with everything that we're saying. And so, I'm sure you've had these conversations. So my question is like, what is their argument? Like, cause I don't even get it. And that's the question. Like, I'm like, we're just saying like, look, you should be able to decide yourself what you do. That's kind of what America's based on, like individualism. And you want like the government to tell all of us what to do. Like, is that really what you want? Like, look at history. Like, that's not what you want. So either way, like, what is their argument? Because I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, well, they don't really know what it is either. And I mean that sincerely.
Okay. That makes sense to me then. Okay.
I actually went on a podcast and I was kind of blindsided because I thought I was coming on with somebody who was kind of friendly. The host of the show, I won't mention his name. He's a loser anyway. But anyway, I go on the show and we had talked before on the phone about what we're going to talk about. And he was very curious that I was not, and I'm not vaccinated. Okay. So we have
Oh,
a
no.
conversation, so we have a friendly conversation. And then I get on the show, and he's got some kind of like 20-something-year-old Marxist communist on there with me. And the two of them kind of attacked me together for not being vaccinated. He actually called me anti-intellectual for not being vaccinated. And so I never even had an opportunity to present a case because he would cut me off when I tried to make a point and so on and so forth. But I'll give you the perfect example about how insane this argument is. Firstly, the CDC very quietly in the middle of the night changed the definition of what a vaccine was, right? It used to, create immunization, and now it creates protection against a virus. Those are very, very different terms. You don't get a booster shot for the measles. Okay. You don't get a booster shot for smallpox or something like that. That's a vaccine. So I would actually even question how you can call this a vaccine because it doesn't cause immunity. So they've changed the definition. So now they can say, well, it's a vaccine because it creates protection. Unless, of course, you're Colin Powell and you are immunocompromised, in which case you can be fully vaccinated and still die from COVID. But that's the group that actually really needs protection. It's not me. It's not you, Tyler. It's people who are obese. We know that 78% of the hospitalizations were amongst the obese. And we know that if you're immunocompromised, you're at risk as well. And so Colin Powell, to me, should have been a really big wake-up call for Americans who are all in for this vaccine, because he's actually the person that we want this vaccine to protect. And it couldn't protect him. And, the arguments changed too. They talked about efficacy rates. They were near 100% many, many months ago. And now they've dropped down, steadily, 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%. Now you need a booster shot, okay? And the argument was always this, remember, and this was insane. This was irrational. You don't get a vaccine to protect other people. You get a vaccine to protect yourself. That's always been the understanding of any kind of treatment, any kind of vaccine like that. You protect yourself, not someone else. And so early on, they decided to say that actually getting this vaccine is about protecting someone else. Right? But then you get the vaccine and you need someone else to be vaccinated to give you full protection. Except that early on, they said if you got vaccinated, it reduced the symptoms, right? So it didn't protect you, it just reduced symptoms. And then we learn out you can be fully vaccinated. You can both get the virus and transmit the virus. So why can't we just have a rational conversation about this? The argument early on was it reduces hospitalization in the individual. But what's the difference if you have there's no conversation about natural immunity, for example. There's no conversation about any of these things. It's just tunnel vision. Everyone has to be vaccinated. But why? I can still get COVID. Well, it reduces your chances of being in the hospital. Okay. I don't understand. Like the goals keep moving. What are you talking about? Now I need a booster shot?
Multiple boosters now, right? Like I think they're saying now, and even Pfizer came out, I think they want to have you take a pill every day or something. It seems like a big money grab to me. And what it really looks like is kind of like that. I guess it's an analogy or like the frog in the boiling water. And it's really crazy. And I feel lucky that I'm in Florida, right? Like, let's just say I like the politics here a little bit better. But to just be like where I'm at and just witnessing this, watching Alex Jones and kind of just looking at it and just watching it progress, like you're saying, like new rules, and they just keep inching closer and closer and closer. And I sit here and I'm like, besides having interviews like this, I don't really know what else to do about it. Like all we can do, and this is what I believe, like kind of what you said you're doing, is just try to wake people up. And that's what Alex Jones is doing too. Steven Crowder, Shapiro. It's just like trying to just say, hey, look, this is what it seems like to me. Here's the common sense. Take it or leave it, but I hope you take it. I really hope you take it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Democrats just don't understand, sadly, that the Democrat Party is not designed to solve problems. Their actually future and their livelihoods depend upon creating problems so they can run as the solvers of those problems. So they actually create these crises, and then they step in and present themselves as those uniquely qualified to solve it. For example, why would they oppose school choice or a voucher system in minority communities throughout this country that are forced to go to schools that have terrible illiteracy rates, that actually are going to condemn this minority student to failure? Why would we not come in as a common sense solution and say, hey, if you're a parent who really wants your kid to get an education, we want you to get out of this community. We don't want to condemn you here forever. We don't want future generations to have to suffer in poverty like this. Your son or daughter can go to a private school. They can go to the school where, the politicians' kids go. That's, to me, seems like a very fair situation, a very fair solution. But the reason they oppose it is because they want a permanent underclass. They want to expand the welfare state. And this is human nature. People need to understand that what we're experiencing in this country today, it's not some kind of soft socialism. It's communism. It's Marxism. That's where we are. And if you listen to the words of this administration, or the real president behind it pulling the strings, which would be Barack Obama and his administration. I'll give you a perfect example. 74 of Barack Obama's White House aides serve as aides to Joe Biden. Murthy, the Surgeon General who is serving in this administration for Biden, well, he was serving in the last 2 years of the Obama administration. Okay, so you actually do see these policymakers that are just taken from the Obama years and planted in the Biden years now. And I just think that they made a miscalculation in 2016. They never comprehended that Trump could ever win. I think that they fully expected Hillary Clinton to win and to kind of finish the job that Barack Obama had started, and it set them back. And so that's why we see them doubling down now, really trying to force this agenda down our throats, because I think they know too, as sad as it is that even 37% of American people apparently support this administration, that's too high for me. Apart from that, the American people are not a communist Marxist majority. It's just not the case. And we're going to see very closely with this race in Virginia between, who am I trying to say right now?
I don't know. I wish I could help you there. I don't know.
No, I'll come up with it in a second. It's a big race right now. Glenn Youngkin and whoever's running, whatever. But that race is very, very important. You have Barack Obama stumping out there as well. And I don't know why people don't. I'm a curious guy like you. I don't have all the answers. I just ask questions. Why is Barack Obama so invested in these policies and this agenda? I've never seen a former American president get so involved in politics. Usually you're supposed to kind of go into the shadows and let your whoever's in office, run the country. That's just kind of how it works. But we've got Barack Obama really moving forward and putting his face on these things. And I think a lot of it is a lack of humility. It's arrogance. He's trying to protect his own agenda and what he's doing. And the secondary part is I think they're afraid that, if Youngkin, for example, wins in this election in Virginia, it's going to hurt their chances of pushing forward and justifying, this $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan and so on and so forth. So they really want to have a victory here so they can come back and act like they have some kind of majority consensus to force this agenda through. And that's why they're fighting so hard now.
So a couple things. One, I want to share a quick story with you because I think you'll find it somewhat humorous. So I was at Florida. There's a lot of Republican spots. Obviously, I think it's mostly Republican, but Miami is Democratic mostly. So I remember the night of the election, I was at a viewing party, and there was like hundreds of people there. Okay, and like lots of girls there, like a lot of people there, and all of them, like it was assumed, right? Like everybody thought Hillary was going to win. Okay. I even thought that too. Like I was just like, I hope Trump wins, but like it doesn't look good, right? Or whatever. So dude, the night goes on. As soon as it was announced, okay, it went from like shock to I have never seen more people. They cried. People were bawling their eyes out. Dude, the city just went like dead. Like it was crazy. I've never seen anything like it. So that was an interesting night. So that's just like a cool little, I've never seen more people cry. It was like a funeral. Like it was bad. Yeah. So that's that. And then, so lastly though, my question is like overall kind of like solving this in a sense, not just solving it, but like, where do you see this going? Like, what's your prediction? Like, do we end up like full commute? Like, do you have a lot of doubts, or do you see like a light at the end of this tunnel?
Well, I have to be an optimist on this just
Yeah.
because the alternative, I don't
It's,
know. I'd rather, and I mean this, I'd rather die than live with the alternative. I
yeah,
sincerely mean that.
agreed. Mhm.
Um, I think that I'm a realist, though. I really am. Things are going to get worse before they get better. We have not hit peak madness or peak suffering. We're not there yet. Inflation is just getting ramped up. And this administration, I mean, Biden's only been in there for less than a year. And so look at the damage that's been done to this country in just 10 months or so. And best case scenario, we win back the House and Senate in 2022. So we've still got a ways to go. And I think that my concern is that we have a Republican Party that really doesn't seem invested or willing to fight as a whole. They're playing defense. And I understand they don't have majorities, but that's not an excuse not to bring the message to the American people and try and use this time to do what we're talking about, educating and informing and letting people know what our solutions are and connecting the dots between Democrats and the policies that are actually oppressing the citizens, just like California, right? We've had over 10 years of a one-party state ruled completely by Democrats. You don't have a Republican fingerprint on a single piece of legislation out here. And California is a disaster. It really is. And you can't point to a Republican for that. And so it's about connecting the dots, though, right? People who flee here and go to Florida, for example, and they vote for Democrats. I mean, how insane are you? It's Stockholm
Yeah, I
syndrome.
don't get that either, man. Like we saw so many people from New York come down here. Like I've lived here 6 years, and what's funny, I actually lived in Encinitas for 6 years before this. So right, San Diego, North County, you're probably familiar.
Yeah.
And like I got out before all the madness, so I didn't really see. But it's so crazy to me. Like arguably the most beautiful state is just been just shit on. I don't know how else to put it. Like it's
Yeah.
terrible. And I've seen all these New Yorkers come down to Miami, and I have conversations with them, and they are still Democrat. And I'm like, but you just left the Democrat area. It didn't work, and now you're here, and this works, and you're trying to rebuild the thing that didn't work. Again, no logic. I can't relate to that.
No, it's the definition of insanity. But but it's a religion for them. Look, I sit here and I'll criticize Republicans all day long.
Sure.
I'm a conservative and I believe in this country and the Constitution foremost. If you don't live according to those guidelines, you're in my radar. Okay. But Democrats view things differently. They're not really willing to criticize the party so much. I mean, I'll criticize. I mean, I despise George Bush at this point, for example. But do you think there are Democrats out there who will openly say, "Oh, I despise Barack Obama"? No, they still think he's the greatest president in American history because they look at it like a religion. And connecting the dots, for example, I did a TV interview the other day, or a couple interviews. I don't know. One of the issues I was talking about was the supply chain crisis, and that's self-inflicted. The country actually has California and our policies to thank for this disaster. It's not to say that there wouldn't be some issues. I mean, when you shut down an economy and interfere with the free market, you're going to have issues like this because you've interfered and intervened. But this could be solved if we had a state that wasn't Marxist. I'll give you an example. The average salary of the dock worker down there in Long Beach, Los Angeles, California, those ports, $171,000 a year. Okay. To unload these crates and whatnot. Okay, whatever. But they're union jobs. And so they have a limited number of people. We're actually one of the few ports in the country that didn't operate 24/7 because the unions don't want to pay on top of the $171,000 a year annual, salary. And so you can't bring private entities in to add hands and make it more efficient because the unions and laws here prohibit them from coming in unless you're a union worker. So it's all about controlling the union. In addition to this, there is actually a report out there that ranks the efficiency of the ports around the world. And Yokohama, Japan is number 1 in the world. Los Angeles and Long Beach are something like 338 and 334. So third world countries have more efficient ports than California.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And the reason is they won't introduce any kind of automation equipment because they don't want to take any jobs away from the union. So of course it's slow going. We've got regulations on vehicles as well. So you don't have as many vehicles available because, for example, they're going to phase out, carbon emitting cars by 2035, which don't even exist yet. So no one's buying the infrastructure and buying more vehicles because those will be obsolete, in a number of years when you're looking at this type of investment. And so here's my point though. I talked to a Democrat the other day here in Napa Valley where I live. And he's like, this is so great. Our governor he's doing something to solve the problem at the port. He's great. He just passed a piece of legislation. I said, oh, really? Did you read the legislation? No, but I know he's doing something about it. I said, well, what did the legislation say? He said, I don't know, but he's fixing the port. He's doing something. I said, you know what he passed? He established a task force to identify the root cause. It solved nothing. Nothing's going to happen, And the thing too is like these unions in the Build Back Better plan, that $3.5 trillion monstrosity that has nothing to do with infrastructure. Guess what? So the unions here in California, they actually prohibit buying and using any kind of automation equipment, right? So in the Build Back Better plan, any of the funds that are actually allocated to go to infrastructure at the ports, well, guess what? There's a piece in that Build Back Better bill that says prohibits any funds going towards buying automation equipment at the ports. The unions own this guy.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's how our country works, folks.
Yeah, no, and you know what, as you were talking, what kind of came up for me, have you read 48 Laws of Power? Have you heard of that book? Okay, so one of the things, I can't remember what the law is exactly called, but it's basically like, if you want to like kind of build a cult or some sort of like religion, what you do, one way to do it is to just oppose the other side completely. And it seems to me, and I think they're doing a lot of other things, but a lot of people that I know that voted for Biden, and these are friends of mine, and I'm still friends. Like, that's what I think is interesting about both sides. If you voted for Biden, I don't agree with the decision, but I'm not going to be like, you're not my friend anymore. In fact, I want to almost get closer to you because I would like to have a deeper conversation to understand why. And either way, I would just love to have the conversation. But regardless, their vote wasn't for Biden. It was against Trump. And I think that's what the media and everything created. Their whole religion is just like anything but Trump. And that's all it is. So it's like, okay, well, if Trump's the one running and it's like avoid Trump, well, then just, you have to vote for the other. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think that's part of the influence that they're using.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I would just say that what I don't understand yet is I understand that people had the Trump derangement syndrome. It was anybody but Trump. But the Democrats act like they were running Jesus Christ or Mother Teresa as their option. Joe Biden was not a superior alternative to Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, look, I've told people too, the Republicans who are like, oh, I can't deal with Trump. I'm like, look, focus on his policies. But if you didn't watch the news and how the news portrayed Trump, you would not arrive at these same conclusions. That Trump's so bad, mean tweets. Yeah, he was a little bit crass and this and that. But you know what he did never do? He never went out like Joe Biden and talked down to the American citizen. He never told them things like, if you got a problem with me and you want to come for the government, you're going to need like nuclear weapons and F-15s and tanks. I mean, comments like this, Trump actually respected the country. And think about it. I mean, he could have shut down these investigations. It would have been lawful for him to do. He really did love this country. And I'll say this about Trump too. He's lost money since he left office. You can't say the same for any Democrat. Look at Barack Obama. Look at Hillary Clinton. Look at even Joe Biden. These people have used this office to become rich, rich beyond any American's imagination, wildest imagination. They don't sacrifice.
Pelosi is like, oh boy, she's really milked it.
She lives down the street from me.
Really? Dude, you should get some stock tips from her. She's pretty good at that.
She's got the nicest paved street in all of Napa Valley, I'm pretty sure. It's always pristine. Those tax dollars at work.
Yeah, interesting. Oh my gosh, dude, that's crazy. Well, dude, so look, I've really enjoyed this. I want to leave the floor to you. If there's anything we didn't cover, please do. Please share, and then also let people know book, websites, socials, everything. And in the future, when it makes sense, I'd love to have you on again. New book, new articles, whatever it is. I enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, me too. I mean, honestly, this is really a pleasure for me. Here on the left coast, I got to say, I can talk a lot to you because I'm starving for any kind of instead of talking to my microphone to an invisible audience that I try to feel out there. This is actually a face, that isn't trying to stab me in the back. So that's nice. But no, I write weekly columns and people can, have a website. I think actually the best place, I've got a couple websites, but, drewallen.substack.com. Subscribing there is probably the easiest. And then, I do my podcast. I do it once or twice a week. It's the Drew Allen Show, where I just talk about a lot of these issues like we're talking about today. And then, I post my articles on there as well. And then I actually quit posting the radio stuff. I do I don't know, some weeks I do 8 to 10 radio interviews a week. And I don't even have time to archive it anymore. If you're in Missouri, you hear me for the day and that's it. But I don't
know. That's awesome, man. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Tyler. Anytime, brother. It's great to be with you.